it's officially on. So thank you for those of us joining us today, both in real time and watching it in the replay. Thanks for dialing into Pivotme Live. As you guys know, we've taken the traditional Pivotme podcast and we've done something a little bit different. We wanted to bring the information to you faster and quicker, so it's most relevant. So we're doing calls like this call with business leaders around the US, around the globe, just talking through how their business is doing, how their business is pivoting in these times, how they're leading their staff and their business through this, through this time, and just share some insights, some resources. Hey, this has helped us. This is some of the things we're doing. Here's some of the things we're not doing right now. And we purposely make these pretty casual because I don't want this to seem scripted. This is a pretty unique time. I want this to feel like a regular organic conversation because we're all going through this. We haven't gone through something exactly like this. So we want them to be real and honest. So here it brings us to where we are today. Technology, again, it gives us and takes us away. All right. So here we go. I'm super pumped about my guest today. We have known each other probably about a year and a half ago. He's a leader in his industry. He's an inspiration to many. I'm lucky enough to call him a friend. We had another nickname last week. I don't remember what it was. What was that? It was something. We had like a symbol too.
Yeah, it was like a besties twinsies because we kept thinking about the same topics during our mastermind meetings.
There we go. So besties, twinsies. There it is. Okay. Armando Lanuti is the president of Creative Works, where they create powerful emotions and memories through immersive attractions for the location-based entertainment industry. We'll put the link in both the website and the Facebook Live, but you can find them at thewoweffect.com. We're going to give specifics on exactly where you can find Armando and his business. But for now, thank you so much for joining us today, Armando.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, April. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing with this, each day. There's so much unknown going on right now, just out in the world, and things are changing so fast that we need information and we need help and guidance from every point of view we can get. So, I appreciate you offering this out there to the business community and at large.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us about your business. Tell us about what you guys do, who you do it for, and then maybe start talking about some of the changes that have happened.
Yeah. So at Creative Works, we, as you did with our intro, we create emotions and memories through immersive attractions. What that means is that we work with family entertainment venues, hotels, casinos, theme parks, museums, everything from your individual mom and pop that has a laser tag or a bowling alley up to large franchises and chains like Urban Air and Main Event. And we build those attractions. So laser tag, mini golf, escape rooms, virtual reality, all those fun things that allow people to, in a typical world, go and interact, right? We typically talk about the fact that in those venues, people aren't typically going there for laser tag specifically. They're going there as part of that social escapism or to celebrate, right? It's typically one or the other is the reason somebody goes to one of our clients' venues. They're escaping what's going on in their everyday life, or they're celebrating, a birthday, a milestone, stuff with their kids, grades, or, whatever the case may be. So we're creating these things. We've got an awesome team of talented artists that, we do everything from the design through engineering and all the way to fabrication and installation. And it's a pretty phenomenal business. I mean, at the end of the day, our business is fun. But, as you mentioned, what are the things that we have to deal with right now? Well, right now, all of our businesses are shut down, right? So that's been one of the first things that we started to see weeks ago or a month or so ago, was that outside of the U.S., we were seeing our types of clients shut down. We work both domestically and internationally. We were seeing them start to get shut down. And we started to kind of look at these leading indicators to what was going to happen here. And then obviously, as we've all experienced, you're not going to go to a bowling alley right now or a movie theater, a laser tag facility, because they are at the moment all in shelter orders and closed down because of limit the number of people, trying to prevent exposure, trying to protect their own teams and whatever the case may be. So that's really affected our industry as a whole, at large. And then for a supplier of that industry like us, obviously that's affecting us. The projects that were already in queue, a lot of them are having to be delayed, right? They can't open right now. They can't even finish their construction right now because the construction crews, the contractors, they're delayed. The government facilities that would normally provide them things like building permits or their inspections and all those kinds of things that they might need are all closed down. And so they're being affected by this, even if we can't show up even if we wanted to, right? And it'd be irresponsible for us to show up with our team and put them at risk and continue to put them on the road again, even if we wanted to and could. That's just not the right decision right now. So it's dramatically impacted our business right now, and what the outlook will be in the future.
So how does one cope with that? So being, you've got design and fabrication, and I think with the third one was installation. If every aspect of your business has been touched, not only your business, but the industry you're in. So it sounds like the industry needs to move ahead for your business to, be functioning in that time. How are you guys doing it, Armando?
We're taking it one day at a time. I think it was last week I posted on my own social media, and you guys yesterday on your live kind of talked about this as well. And Frozen 2, like Pobby is like, when you don't know what the future is, you just do the next right thing. And I think that's what we're trying to do right now, right? To quote Frozen 2 of all things, I've got 3 boys, 7 and under, for those that don't know. So we're watching a lot of Disney right now. But we don't know what the future holds realistically a week or 2 from now, let alone being able to plan 30, 60, 90 days out, being able to plan, a year out like you could in a much more stable time, which is really weird because that was a month ago, right? I mean, a month ago, we had 7 or 8 job postings that we couldn't fill for the life of us. Like we were struggling to find talented and qualified people to join our team that had the same niche skills that we needed for what our industry is. And then, a month later, and we're down almost 60% of our team members. Wow. Which is astonishing. It's something that we would have never been able to plan for, could have ever expected. And so as things kind of started to unfold, we took it, kind of proactive measures. We started moving everybody that was in that design, in that engineering, project management, sales, marketing, all the desk jobs, so to speak. And we tried to move them all remote. So we spent a week or so making sure our infrastructure was able to handle that. File structure, bandwidth, people at home who don't normally work from home, making sure we sent our guys to get them set up with the equipment that they needed. And they started kind of going down that path, and they've been able to continue to work, which has been great. And to be honest, right before we kind of ran into this brick wall, so to speak, we were behind on a lot of work because we were so busy. So on their plate, it actually is providing them a little bit of relief because it's giving them the time to get caught up and the time to even get ahead so that, when we can start producing, we're able to get things out the door as quickly as we can again. On the production side, that's been a lot harder, right? Because we had a certain portion of our crew that was affected first because they travel. Like their primary job is to go from Indiana, where we're located, to all over the country, all over the world, and spend a week installing whatever the attraction is. And that part of our business obviously stopped very, very quickly. And then we got a stay-at-home order about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, here in Indiana. So, and we're not considered essential, obviously. So from that standpoint, all of our production staff that, they're craftsmen. Their lifeblood is getting their hands on the wood, the foam, the paint guns, whatever the case may be, and using their amazing skills to create awesome environments. But that's gone right now. We can't, I mean, legally, we can't have them in, doing the everyday production work. And so that affected another large portion of our team. And when it first happened, it was really hard. It was probably by far the hardest thing we've ever had to do as a company, definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do as an individual. But we tried to handle it with everybody's best interest in mind as well as we could, given the situation. So,
Sure.
From our standpoint, it was about putting together packets for them, right? And hey, here's a letter from us about what's going on. Here's how you can sign up for unemployment. Here's other places that are hiring. Here's food and other relief programs that are here locally and nationally. Here's a letter of recommendation that you'll get, I'm sorry, we were like, hey, we'll provide that letter of recommendation, with your last paycheck. So you have that for finding other jobs and whatnot if you can. Now, our goal is we tried to furlough a large portion of those people so that they can also carry their benefits. We were unfortunately not able to do that for everybody, but that way they have those benefits and we have that ability to try and, bring them back as soon as possible, as soon as the stay-at-home lifts and we're able to start production again.
Yeah. I think that fantastic, great information. And that packet that you mentioned is really, really important. So for those who are listening, that are in the very tough position that Armando and his company has been in, providing something, doing your best to still guide them on, okay, here's the next available options to you. Here's the best way for us to support you through this. Because depending on the industry, depending on the business, your hands really are tied. And so you can't continue as usual, but this is an opportunity to step up and say, okay, how can I still support my team? And what a great way to do it, giving them something, okay, here's the guidance and offering for letters of recommendation. Should they be able to find employment during this time that is essential or in another industry? That's a really great point.
Well, and it's just realizing that, look, none of them did anything wrong, right? None of us did, from a business owner, from the people that are still a part of the company to the people that, had to be furloughed or laid off. They didn't do anything wrong. And that's the hardest part about this, is that they're in this situation through no fault of their own. The business is in this situation through no fault of its own. And it's just one of those things where when all of a sudden your income, just like your guy from yesterday, I can't remember what his name was, AJ, is, your income literally went from what you would normally expect to almost nothing overnight. And even when you are well positioned with cash and loan reserves, when, in our case, for the size team that we had, our burn rate was $200,000 a payroll. It doesn't take long to burn through that when we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation.
Sure.
Right. It went from a month ago to, hey, this is barely going to affect anybody. This is just the flu, from a public standpoint, an acknowledgement standpoint, to, okay, everybody's got to start staying at home and look at how this is really affecting everybody. And it is so much more than that now, right? And we don't know when the stay-at-home orders are going to end. We don't know when you're going to be able to, our clients are going to necessarily be able to open their doors up again. It'll happen. We need to plan for that happening, and we need to be positive and proactive about it. But we just don't know when. It's the matter of when, and that's the part that makes it really hard right now for, I think, any business owner that's affected by this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of business owners, the struggle that we have to acknowledge is that several business owners are walking this line, this fine line of, we want to continue to progress our business. We want to keep the doors open. We want to keep as many people employed as possible, but we also want to be responsible. We need to be socially responsible. And you're walking this fine line. And what was socially responsible 3 weeks ago, to your point, is now changed today. So, the person we had on yesterday was talking about, well, I now supply masks to my staff, and he was doing a whole host of things because he wants to continue the business if possible. He's following all the guidelines and he's being very responsible. But he said, I'm walking this fine line, and we are, right? We're walking this fine line of, we need the business to continue. We want the business to continue. We employ people that we absolutely love, and we want to help them continue with their careers as well. but you want to make sure that and it's a constant pivot, right? Because again,
Yes.
what was okay 2 weeks ago, and I remember a chat with you and another manufacturer that I work with, where you guys were kind of going back and forth on what does your production schedule look like, how are you pivoting, and what was valid or relevant 3 weeks ago when that conversation was happening is no longer relevant today. I mean, it's changed so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's been the most surreal portion of all of this, is just the speed in which our reality has changed.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it went from, hey, we'll just have to pull the guys off the road for a little bit, to, you know, we'll use this time to get caught up, to, you know, literally 3 days later, oh my gosh, we've got to let people go. And then 4 days after that, oh my gosh, we're now sheltered in place. Right? I mean, it accelerated. And I mean, it was something that the behind the scenes, you know, that the team doesn't always get to see. And we tried to communicate this afterwards, but was, you know, our leadership team was trying to figure out the way to navigate this for a week and a half. And it was literally, we were having meetings on an every day, every other day basis, you know, sometimes for hours long each night, trying to figure out what changed during the day, right? What new news got brought out by the national media, the national government, federal government, the state government, local municipalities were all different a little bit around here in Indiana. And then because we do about 95% of our business outside of Indiana, it was about understanding what was happening in other parts of the country as well, right? So when we decided to stop our traveling, for example, where our world had already changed, and I didn't want to put at risk, you know, hey, we had 5 guys that were about to get on a flight to go to Houston and work for a week. You know, from my standpoint, the business owner standpoint, my concern was, well, what happens if one of those 5 guys happens to catch it and get ill? Well, at that point, they were just working shoulder to shoulder, trying to get this project ready. I've got to assume that they are now potentially, you know, have caught it as well. And I've now isolated 5 guys for 14 days in quarantine in a state thousands of miles away from their family. Right? Like that was where we made decisions probably a little bit earlier than others might have had to,
For sure.
because we had to start thinking of it from that standpoint. To then we had, at the same time where we chose to stop traveling, we had a client who was in another state who had not been affected yet. They were livid that we weren't showing up with their product.
Yeah.
They were just like, how dare you not show up? Like, I mean, all these threats and these things, were like, let's just, it may not have hit your radar yet.
Yeah.
Right. You know, we felt like we were maybe a week and a half ahead of the national narrative, but, you know, and they've since apologized and they get it, because it has caught up, like reality has caught up. But that's how fast things have been changing, where, you know, we were having to make decisions so rapid fire and deal with new rules almost every day. Like, we've talked a little bit about liking, you know, the author Simon Sinek and some of his books. Like, the Infinite Game, this is it.
This is
right
it.
now, right? This is exactly it. Is you must have existential flexibility right now.
Yes.
And that is the key piece. It's literally your existence as a business, as a company, is in jeopardy if you're not willing to make changes fast enough, and if you're not willing to pivot and be agile in the changing conditions. You risk losing everything. And that was the hard part. Right.
That's one of the things we talked about, is that we can't necessarily look at the doors that have closed, because there are doors, and whether that's revenue doors, that's client doors, there are doors that have closed. We can't expect to continue to do business the exact same way we did a month ago. Because I want to ask a question about your earlier point, but
Sure.
I think that it's really important, because people are like, okay, well, head down, helmet on, I'm just going to keep focusing, moving ahead, which is important, but don't blindly move ahead. So use I think it's a Stephen Covey concept. Go ahead and climb that ladder, but make sure that ladder is against the right wall, because walls changed. And so you have to keep climbing the ladder, but think about it. It can't be like, well, you know, we had this marketing strategy and we're just going to double down on the marketing strategy. Well, wait a second. Let's make sure that we need that message is still relevant, or the product we're about to release is still relevant. So think about if there is another opportunity that you should be exploring right now. And if you need to pivot your business, don't just do more of the same thing, because the game has changed. To one of my clients' point, Eric Miller, he's the first person actually that we had on Pivot Me Live. He said, I'm playing the game, but the game keeps changing. Like, I think I'm running down the board, headed to Boardwalk. Like I'm killing it at Monopoly. And he's like, and suddenly it's sorry, or I'm paraphrasing here, Eric, but the game keeps changing. And so be aware of the efforts that you're making. We have to consistently show up and be cognizant that people are dealing with a lot of different things, and we have to meet people, both our clients and our team, where they are. But be aware that we can't always just do things the way we did a month ago, because the game has changed.
Yeah, we definitely have to find new ways to improve, new ways to reach different markets, to adjust our products in different ways if we can, and to realize that even beyond the health crisis, there are going to be economic impacts as well, right? To everything that's going on. I think there's going to be a lot of negative in the short term. With some of the stimulus that's happening, I think that, there will be some rebound, but again, we just don't know, because we don't know how long it's going to last, right? The government is writing checks that they're making presumptions of how long we're going to deal with this, and they just don't know.
They don't know.
They have no clue.
And people are doing their best with the information that they have. And when we know better, we do better. And I think that one of the messages that I'd really love to get out there is just have a lot of patience with, especially people that are trying to navigate this and trying to lead through this. They've got 20% of the data points they need to make a decision. And they're looking at a wall, and there's a bunch of dots on the wall, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And they're like, I think it's a cat. Maybe it's a house. And so recognize they're in a real tough position. So our governor did a live yesterday, and talking about the changes that we're here in Nevada, talking about the changes, and there are more changes to come. And it was amazing to see the backlash of his talk on, again, social media. It's not necessarily the greatest place to see people, positivity shine through. But the backlash was so intense. And man, it's real easy to be the armchair quarterback. It's real easy, because he and many other leaders at this time are going, okay, I don't have enough data points, but I still have to make decisions. Nobody's got it easy right now. It's tough.
Correct.
And again, that's businesses or politics.
Yeah, and I think that's a key piece right there, is just realizing that some of the leaders have access to maybe more information than the individuals underneath them, but they are still trying to figure out the picture, right, from my toddler before he's told me what it is, right?
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what's happening. I like your analogy with the dots on the wall and trying to know if it's a cat. Is they may have a handful of more dots than you do as an individual, but they still are operating on incomplete data, right? And
they have to make a decision off of it. They can't sit they can't go, well, let's wait and see how this pans out.
Correct.
We can't.
Right. Because it might be too late at that point. They have to act now to try and prevent it. I mean, and that's one of those things that we had tried to use as much as possible in our company before all this happened, and that we definitely recommend people do, especially in a crisis like this, and that is that idea of assuming positive intent, right? If you go into every one of these situations, and I think it was Brene Brown that we got this from, where you just need to go into every situation assuming positive intent, assuming that, April, you're making the decisions you're making with the information that you have and using your best judgment at this moment in time. And as long as I am always assuming that you're doing that with that mindset, then I can have a different level of peace with those decisions. And you're going to make wrong decisions. I'm going to make wrong decisions. The politicians are going to make wrong decisions right now because they are incomplete pictures.
Sure.
And so we also need to be very, very careful, I think, to not vilify people for decisions that were made with incomplete data, when in some cases, some businesses, for lack of a better term, they had a gun to their head, right? We're Tony Robbins, fans. And one of the things that he always talks about is, if you're trying to improve yourself or you're trying to break a bad habit, what is that one thing you need? You need leverage, right? That and the most extreme leverage, so to speak, is a gun to your head or to a loved one's head. Like
Yeah.
some people are having to make decisions in those kind of scenarios. I'm not trying to
Mhm.
say mine were that serious. I don't know about yours,
Mhm.
but there are people out there that is where they're at.
Yeah.
Is that the decisions they're making are life and death, whether it be physically or a comparison to their business
Mhm.
for the long-term, existence. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where you've got to assume that positive intent, and you've got to not vilify them if they made a couple wrong steps along the way.
Assuming positive intent is a fantastic takeaway from this. And I hadn't thought about that in relation to this, but I think that is such a good point, Armando, because I think there's a lot of people right now that are assuming negative intent, assuming that they're being duped, or assuming that there's an agenda, and not to say everybody's intent is indeed pure and altruistic, but assuming positive intent, I think would help us so much right now. One thing I want to circle back to a comment you made earlier, and it's actually
Mhm.
related to we've got Sandra actually from Spain dialing in. Thank you, Sandra. And Raylina as well. Raylina being one of the manufacturers we referenced earlier. Thanks, Raylina, for joining us. So one thing is, you did know early. And I want to talk
Mhm.
about that real quick, because
Yes.
there are three people that I work closely with that all knew early, and three of them are manufacturers. One of them, I remember sitting in a meeting with her. She manufactures out of China, and we had a private conversation, but in there she was saying, no, this is really serious. My factory shut down, and kind of relayed the severity of it then. And she's like, forget the news, forget what's coming out of China. She's like, I talk to Chinese every day. That's who I do
Mhm.
business with. All of our material is manufactured in China. And I see what's happening. So she was the first person to put it on my radar. And since then, there was a couple of other manufacturers that said, we read the tea leaves. Again, no misinformation, nothing. We're talking to people on the ground, and we see how it's disrupted business and life and all these things. You were one of those people.
Mhm.
Did you know for the same reason manufacturing may be out of there, or having partners out of Asia? How did you know so soon?
That was one of the first indicators that we got. And so some of our supply chain does come from Asia, Europe, the Middle East, et cetera. And so things like lighting and special effects, which we utilize in a lot of our products,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that is made in Asia. And we were seeing product that we could normally get turned around in a couple of days to a week, all of a sudden get put on indefinite hold, or say, hey, it's going to take 3 weeks, to all of a sudden, those 3 weeks come up and they're like, it's another 3 weeks. So
Mm.
that was one of the very first indicators that we got was that. We also have some clients that are located, and partners that are located with clients in Asia, in Australia, in Europe and whatnot, which all seem to get some of this ahead of where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And we were seeing that, like, hey, they're shutting down things in public,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're limiting the number of people that can go to a gathering. And we started to also get feedback from some of our clients that are here in the US who have partners and relationships as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, hey, I think we're going to have to close, right? Or we want to temporarily postpone this project or pause on this project until we know more about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then with some of our trade organization that we work with, the mouthful, it's called IAPA, but it's the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, right? So super long. But they even held a meeting with the White House that, because they do a lot of lobbying on the behalf of everybody from the individual, bowling facility all the way up to Disney World. And on all the safety, the regulations, and those kind of things. And so they talk to us,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like, hey, be prepared, right? And
Wow.
because you're gonna be an industry that's gonna get affected. And
Mm-hmm.
as early as 2-3 weeks ago, I think I mentioned it in one of our masterminds. Although we've got these stay-at-home orders that are only until the middle of April or even the beginning of April, as of when we were talking in March, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, don't be surprised if public venues like that can't open until June, until after Memorial Day. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you remember that, but like,
Mm-hmm.
we're having to think through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to our industry, the other piece that's going to get added onto that is, even when they do open up, there's been rumors and rumblings that they're going to have to open up, whether they're a restaurant, a bowling center, a movie theater, at a reduced capacity.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to still practice some sort of a social distancing and spacing within there, spreading the tables out, reducing the amount of, chairs and people that can be in those venues, every other bowling lane instead of every bowling lane, every other seat in a movie theater, those kind of things. And I think they're also going to even affect throughput, where there's going to be more stringent cleaning guidelines, both mandated as well as, let's call it, publicly demanded, right? I think that when you go to an entertainment venue, for example, in the future, the cleanliness is going to become part of the show, right? Because you're going to want to see, you're going to want to see that they're wiping stuff down. Like when you've ever gone to a busy restaurant on a Friday night at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, right? And they sometimes take you to a table that they're just busily just busting off real quick, and it's still a little bit dirty, and you're just like, finally, I got to sit down. I've got these kids. I don't care. Like, you're not going to do that anymore. You're going to no, hold on. Why don't you go ahead and just take a little bit longer and clean this appropriately before I sit down with my family?
Yeah.
Right? Play that out to the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, the entertainment industry. When are we going to feel comfortable going to a stadium again? And like, I'm a diehard Indianapolis Colts fan. When am I going to feel comfortable, with my family, and are 65,000 people going to be comfortable going in that stadium again? I think we'll get there. Like, I don't want to paint it as a doom and gloom, but I also don't feel like there's going to be this magical light switch that some people feel like, oh my gosh, the stay-at-home order's lifted. We can all go out and dance and hug again. Like, it's not going to happen like that. It's going to be much more like a dimmer switch, where it's going to slowly get turned on over a period of time. And then our new normal at the end of that still might be different than what it was in February or March of this year.
I love what you said. Thank you. That was great. I love what you said about the cleanliness becomes part of the show. And that's an incredibly valid point. I loved when you illustrated the perfect picture of every time we've gone to a restaurant with our two kids, just it's fine. Just let us sit down. It doesn't matter if the table's sticky. We don't care. I think that's a really good point, and also something that business owners really do need to hear. So whether you have an attraction people are going to be sitting in, or a stadium where people are sitting in the chairs, or even a restaurant, make cleanliness part of the show. We'll probably start hearing marketing messages around, we use a such and such cleaning solution and we wipe down everything. And I remember that happening just at the beginning at our local gym. So before they shut down, they were kind of paring down their hours, and they said, hey, well, we close 2 hours early because we go through and we wipe everything down. And the messaging was already starting to change. And so for the business owners that's applicable to, think about how your messaging will need to change, how you'll need to talk about, hey, this is our cleaning process, and that could be even things that are being shipped from Amazon. I mean, there's just so many ways that will apply. I want to shift gears real quick and thank you, Raylina and Mark, Kimberly and Jenny, who've all joined us. Unfortunately, when you use Zoom integration, it has this annoying habit of lumping people together. So it'll say, and X amount of other people are watching. So whoever those people are, thank you for joining us. And sorry, we can't specifically name you, but we care that you're here. One thing I want to talk about sort of on the kind of the leadership end, Armando, is this is a challenging time. Some people are scared. Some people, it's a time of great uncertainty for many. And you and I have talked about this. There are people that have a lot of tools in their tool belt to navigate this. And for some people, they've never navigated anything like this. They've never navigated this level of hardship or inconvenience or just strain on them personally or professionally. How are you showing up as a leader in this time? And whether that's for your staff, your community, your family, like, how intentional are you about how you're showing up, and what does that look like?
I think it is incredibly important right now, more important than it ever has been before. This is something I was just talking to some of my team members about yesterday even. We have to realize that we're all role models. We're all being watched. It's not just about what we say, it's about what we do. Taking that extra time, especially when everybody is distanced right now and working remote, to just send a message, through whatever messaging service your company uses, a video chat, just, and, at the end of that meeting, instead of just ending or at the beginning while you're waiting for others to get on, like, ask them how they're doing. And don't just ask a single basic open-ended, question like, oh, how you hanging? Like, ask something a little bit more intentional. Be a little bit more specific. How are you, if they've got kids, how are you handling the e-learning, right? How are you working through that progress? How are you burning up their energy? Talk about things like that that are a little bit more pointed versus just wide open, like, how's the weather today, right? That's about as I don't care of a statement as you can make. So try and be a little bit more intentional about it and be a little bit more specific to it. I think one of the other big things that we've tried to do is find ways to gather these people who are used to being in office. So we've held a virtual Zoom coffee break for our team this last week, a couple of times.
That's awesome.
Where we just send out a thing and like, hey, it's a 15-minute break. We're coming on. What are you watching at home? How are you coping? What are the projects you're working on since you can't go out? What are your hobbies? Those kind of things. Just letting them get to see their friends, right? Letting them get to see the others, and that helps build that rapport and keep them connected at a time where they're very much so disconnected. Another thing that we did is, so I'm a big avid reader and I love going to conferences for improving myself and trying to improve our team. So we also work with Dave Ramsey in the Entree Leadership Program. And they have this thing where it's basically a weekly report tool. And so we just implemented that with our leadership team, and we're going to then, test it this week or so with the leadership team. And then it's going to go down to our next tier of leaders that are department heads and the like. And then it's going to go out wide to the rest of our team. And basically, they get asked 3 questions. And it's similar to some of the conversations that we have in our mastermind groups, which I absolutely love. It's just that idea of like, what went right this week, right? What went right? What went wrong? What was your high? What was your low? And what are some just additional things? And then it also asks, just, hey, what's your morale at? What's your workload at? And what's your stress level at? And they just, they click on the little emoji icon, like when you come out of like a Costco or a bathroom, and it's got the 3 colored faces, except for it's got 5, and ranging from red to green and shades in between. It's like, hey, I'm about here, right? And the whole point is just to get a pulse, right? Just to have that little bit of a pulse on what is going on. And this is a tool that I wish I would have been using longer, because I've been doing all access with Entree Leadership for the better part of a year now. Because even in the first week of using it with our leadership team, it gave me insight that even with us having pretty consistent and regular communication, I hadn't received yet, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take but 3 to 5 minutes for the team member to fill out. They get this message on a Friday, and it's just one more way that they're going to be able to let us know what's going on in their work and personal lives that they feel that we should be aware of, right? And the goal is just to have a little bit more data, as we just talked about, and data points and information is so important right now. It's just one more data point that we can now make decisions based off of on an individual basis, on a team basis, or on a company basis. And so finding tools like that, I think, are really important. We also, again, I'm a big Audible listener because I have about a 40-minute commute back and forth, and a lot of our team travels, as we've talked about. So one of the things that we started to do is opening up our Audible account to a wider group than what it originally was, where we have already got 100 different books, right, ranging for all sorts of different skill sets, and spreading it down to another tier of leadership to be able to have access to that, just to improve themselves, right, and find ways to get better. Because again, when we come out of this, we're not going to be able to immediately go back up to a 77-person company. We know that we're going to have to stair-step our way back up to it to a certain degree. Now, how fast we can climb those stairs is going to depend on, how fast the stay-at-home orders go away and how fast our clients can open back up, and how fast some of the funding that is being put into programs actually gets out to people.
Sure.
Will all dictate the speed that we can climb those stairs. But we know that for a period of time, we've got to get stronger, faster, meaner, leaner to be able to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the Entree Leadership tool, and also mentioning opening up Audible. That's something that I hadn't considered. And that's something you and I share as voracious reading, or perhaps listening to other people read. And I hadn't thought about that. So
yeah, because your Audible account can actually have up to 10 active people listening at one time on an account. Now, it can get a little bit tricky if two people are trying to listen to the exact same book, with regards to bookmarks, but it will still allow you to do that. So, but it's one of those things that's just one more piece that we can provide to our team to try and cope with what's going on and better themselves when they've got a little bit of time to do so.
Sure. I love that. And I love also just the check-in, making it more in-depth and more intentional than just, hey, how's it going? Because we've been trained that the answer is supposed to be okay or good.
Yes.
Or we kind of, and then that's it. That's the end of the conversation. As who is it? Chris Hogan called it drive-by leadership, right? You just kind of like, hey, how's it going? And you're gone. And I always love that. As soon as he said, don't practice drive-by leadership, I knew exactly what he meant. And I was very aware of that phrase going forward. And asking very specific questions. I love when you said, hey, how are you doing with distance learning? To that, I would have to say, how much time do you got? Because it is a struggle. But asking something very specific, how's your spouse handling it? That's something that has come up on many conversations with clients and friends. We were talking about business. And then when I say, hey, how's your partner doing? How's your spouse doing? There usually is this long pause. And then like, well, there's a struggle, or maybe we've got some issues with anxiety or depression, or some bad habits have started to come up, as they have for many people. And so asking very specific questions about kids, about spouses and partners, asking about health, or are you getting out? Are you getting some sunshine? Are you, people, we have quite a few people that used to do Orange Theory, and you and I have talked about this too. And if they're used to doing Orange Theory every morning at 5 a.m., or one of our guys, he catches the 4 p.m. Orange Theory every day, and that's his social hour. He's not catching that anymore. And so when I asked, how's that going? He's like, well, I've just replaced it with eating. And so, which many people have, but just having those kinds of conversations, they may not be getting asked that level of in-depth conversations, and they may need to hear it. And leadership is going to look like investing in your people a little bit more right now, because there's a lot that they're managing. And it's something we've got to be aware of, that a conversation that maybe would ordinarily take 5 minutes may look like 10 or 15 minutes, but it might be the very thing that your team needs.
100%. And I think that the point you brought up too is realizing that although as a leader and as a business owner, you understand how the changes in your business might have affected your team member, but realizing that they do have a second half, right? They do have a wife or a husband and kids potentially at home that are all affected by this, and that, they may still have a job, but their spouse may not, right? Or they may be furloughed, or, also even realizing again that people may not be able, when they're working from home, they may not be able to work your traditional 9 to 5 either, because they do have to handle the e-learning. They do have to handle, in many of our team members' homes, both parents are potentially working remote, right? And so they're having to balance each other's meetings, and hey, I've got this meeting that's important at this schedule, and I've got this meeting that's important in this schedule. So in the opposite times, they're having to watch the kids, right? Or get lunch ready, or whatever the case may be, and realizing that you need to be flexible, right? Somebody not answering an instant message on Slack or Hangouts or Microsoft Teams doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working, or that they don't want to answer. They just may have to be dealing with one of those other things. And so we've got some team members that are starting their workday as early as 5 or 6 in the morning, so that then they can deal with the e-learning from 9 to 11 or whatever the case may be, take their lunch break, and then they work again in the afternoon, right? To still get in the hours that they need to work on and the projects they need to work on, with then flipping their spouse or significant other schedule in there somehow too. It's just realizing that we all need to be flexible at this moment, and that it's affecting so much more. And just having those conversations, like you said, like, so how is your spouse dealing with it? Are they having to work at home too? That just gives you that better understanding of what to deal with.
Yeah.
right? And how you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because I'm part of an organization that is, we'll say, women in leadership, and it, the narrative in there is it's pretty strong of the struggle right now, because having to balance business and kiddos at home, and maybe there's a spouse there, maybe there's not, maybe their spouse is an essential worker, like mine is. And so, and again, just being honest, I think that really serves us right now. There's a call that I do on Wednesdays, at 1 p.m. my time, and my husband is at the hospital. And so I just to be clear, because I had to clarify this for someone, they said, wait a second, you're leaving your kids alone? No, I'm not leaving my kids alone. But I go to my home office and I literally call my mom on Facebook Messenger so she can see my kids. And now I have a 6 and 9-year-old daughter. And what that means is that sometimes you have to referee, sort of like, I mean, it's some pretty intense refereeing. So I have her on FaceTime, well, not FaceTime, it's Facebook Messenger, but that they can see grandma, and the phone sits on the counter because nobody can touch it. Because if someone touches it, then they'll fight over the fact that I can't see grandma. Anyways, so for 60 minutes, she's refereeing them. Hey girls, what are you doing? And she can see them. And again, I'm just upstairs in the home office, but I mean, we've got to get creative at times like this. And it's hard to focus on the task at hand when you know you have a 6 and 9-year-old roaming freely around the house, finding who knows what. But that's real life right now. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't talk about that. And just seeing the conversation that I've seen in the Women in Leadership group, it's a real shame that people feel like they can't be honest about what that's like. And I know that men and women are feeling it, but that struggle, it's very intense. It's a lot to manage, showing up for your business, and whether you're leading that business, whether you're employee of the business, to do that, and then e-learning, and then just showing up for our kids, because what they need from us has changed. For us in the last week, we've noticed a huge difference. We were just having this conversation last night in our household that, I think our kids felt like they were on spring break before, and now they realize it's not just spring break. And again, our kids are a little bit younger. I'm sure it's a whole host of other challenges in teenage years, but they're starting to feel that none of the pools are open. They don't go to jujitsu. They don't go to the trampoline park. They can't see any of their friends. And that's a struggle. So again, how we have to show up for our kids and our family has changed too. So, I love that you're saying about the flexibility. How have you implemented more flexibility with your staff, just being cognizant of the particular family dynamics, or that maybe their partner is an essential worker and they're out of the house? Have you had to be flexible in that regard, and what are some of the things you're doing?
Yeah, I think for the most part, and this is just something that we've always done as a company, so it's served us well in a time like this, is that if we have to micromanage you, then we've made a poor decision on who we've brought onto the team in the first place, typically.
That's good.
And so from our standpoint, they're not having to necessarily ask permission, right? That's maybe a way that people can look at this differently, is they should be communicating and letting you know what they're having to deal with, and you should be asking those questions. And it's not about a permission thing. And you need to realize as a leader that you don't really have the right to give them that kind of edict right now in the first place, right? You may need them to work their 40 hours in this week, but you can't edict that it's necessarily going to be this hour to this hour, because you can't control all those other things that are going on at home. And if you try and do that, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting up your teammate for failure.
Sure.
And so a lot of them, for example, we still have some clients that, like us, we're able during the stay order to do building maintenance and updates. So we have a small crew doing some tweaks that we've needed to do for a while. I heard you yesterday use the reference that we always feel like we're building the race car while it's going 200 miles an hour down the racetrack. Yes. So we finally have a pit stop. So we're using we're using a skeleton crew to do some of the updates we need, change the tires, so to speak. And they're doing those things. And with our teams that are working remote, we have our clients that are doing that. So our support call staff, while we still are receiving clients from who their facilities are shut down, but they're doing some of the maintenance and some of the repairs and some of the service and support that they needed to do but weren't able to get to. And so they're still working 9 to 9, 7 days a week, spread out amongst them from a shift. right? And so it's like, who based on your schedule can work these shifts? And sometimes there's guys that are working like a 2 to 3 hour gap here, then they have a 6 hour gap they can't work, and working another 3 hour gap on this day, or whatever the case may be, to try and accommodate that. Our project management team is the same way, where they have varied, numbers of spouses that are essential workers, that have kids and and family that can't take care of them, that used to take care of them and stuff, because they're trying to isolate, where they're now having to, again, adjust their schedule, and they're just communicating within their team. And when you've created that right culture, what you'll find is that those individual teams, they'll cover for each other, right? They'll work out that schedule themselves, as long as you give them the freedom to do so. Right. And one of those other things that I think it was Chris Hogan, used in one of his conferences I saw, is you want to give that responsible freedom, right? You want to set up the fence in the backyard, and you just want to say, go play. You don't necessarily need to tell them they need to play soccer, baseball, basketball on the swing set. You just need to give them the general guidelines of your expectations that you have in your business, just like you would with your kids, and just let your team do what they need to do.
Yeah.
You don't have, you want to set that, let's paint the picture of what does success look like? What does accomplishing your task look like? Necessarily how you get there, I'm not worried about it, because everybody works in different ways. Now, if I see somebody or a leadership team, see somebody struggling or doing something in a really egregiously inefficient way, we'll try and offer some tips and guide them down the right path. But for the most part, again, if they're that far off base, we probably made a wrong decision, at some point along those lines.
That was a great line when you said, if we have to micromanage my staff, then I made the wrong decision in the hiring process. That's a really, really good point. Also, when you said, what does success look like? This is just another way, Armando, that you and I are twinsies, because in my emails, for any of my staff that's watching, they're going to be laughing. So I'll highlight what needs to be done. And I always write, what does success look like? And I answer that question. So it's funny that you would use that phrase, because we use that as a tool for effective delegation. So real quick, talk to us about, so you've shared some resources. Is there any other resources that you can share that are helping you? You know what, real quick, we just got the feed. So shout out to Wendy and Debbie and Robin. Thank you so much for watching and participating again. I know you guys have been avid listeners and watchers, so thank you for that. What is there additional resources you'd share that are helping you guys navigate this time, or you personally navigate this time?
So on a personal note, and this is going to sound a little bit dorky. So like, I'm not the Netflix guy for the most part, or the TV show guy. Like, I just play video games. Like, so one of the big things that I would recommend for anybody, whether it's a hobby, whether it is a TV show, or a video game or whatever, just because we're working at home, just because we're in this time of chaos and uncertainty, doesn't mean you still don't need to take the time to decompress for yourself. Sometimes that is going out for a run, right? My wife, that's been her thing, is she's just like, hey, our youngest is down for a nap. The older two are gonna play video games for an hour, and I'm not gonna feel guilty about it, and I'm gonna go run, right? Like, that is one of her releases. Mine is sometimes like, hey, the kids are all at bed at night. I've knocked out, the things I need to get knocked out. I'm going to just play a game for an hour or two, because while I'm playing that game, and I like that because it keeps me engaged. So my mind can't start spooling up and going down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm watching a show, I'll be reading my email. Like, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think one of the things that I just recommend everybody do, whether it's exercise, learning, other decompression tactics, like, this is a time to not just be, lazy and on the couch. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying, but you do need to still put your own face mask on first on the airplane, so that you're taken care of and your needs. And that's something that I think is really easy to lose sight of it at a time like this. And we really have talked about a lot of the resources. Like, I'm big on, YouTube videos, on Audible books, on just educational pieces. If you've got an Android phone, I use the Google News app to just, constantly be able to stay up with whatever's going on in the world. subscribing to certain publications that I like, and that I feel give good, neutral, perspectives on things, I think is just another piece. I think that's just something in general that I think society as a whole needs to pay attention to, is that try and get your information and your news from as many sources as possible that are trusted sources, right? I don't want to go down a political path. I'm much more centered than most in the world. And I will have, like, it's funny, I got mocked the other day when I was in the office and somebody came in. I'm like, I have both Fox News and CNN both up, right? Like, I just have them both on, right? Because they report the same information differently.
Sure.
Right. And so making sure that you're seeing both sides of that coin, or going to others that are a little bit more straightforward for your information, I think that it'll calm some of the bias, some of the polarization. And that is probably my greatest hope for all of us coming out of this, is the realization that leading up to the crisis that we're in, we had become such a polarized, everything black and white society, no center, no gray in a lot of areas. And I'm really hopeful that we come out of this realizing that, like, we're just humanity, right? And we need to take care of each other regardless of what nationality we are, regardless of whether we lean left or right, regardless of, what class, so to speak, that we're in, is that we need to do what's right for society as a whole for us to come out of this.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way we can come out of this, and just making sure that you're getting those inputs from as many different sources as you can.
I think it's a really good point that this does show, highlights our humanity. This is our opportunity if we choose to. It definitely highlights how no one's immune. Literally, it's a novel virus. No one's immune, and that we all have that commonality. And this is an opportunity where we can really demonstrate our humanity. So there will be people, for a variety of reasons, that will instead try to highlight our differences. But we have an opportunity to highlight our similarities and our humanity. And there's simple things that we can do to do that. Let's not make this political. Let this be about humanity and how we can show up for each other and support each other during this time. I do want to go back to great point, Armando. I do want to go back to something you said earlier that I think is so relevant. You were talking about, hey, so go to the thing that decompresses you, like still put your face mask on. And I just want to highlight something you said. You were talking about, for me, it happens to be gaming. For my wife, it happens to be running. I want to point out a distinction here. Armando said decompression, which is different than distraction. And I point that out because I think a lot of us are turning towards distraction, right? Whether that's scrolling social media, whether that's watching something mindless on TV. And I get it. And this is not coming from a place of judgment. It's just a matter of, think about, when you're done doing that activity, how do you then feel? If you feel decompressed by it, great. You do you. It's serving you. But if you just feel distracted during that short period of time, and at the end you feel the same, if not worse, maybe that's not the activity that's serving you. So I would really encourage you, like what Armando said, reach for something that decompresses you, not just distracts you.
Well, I think it's just like we talked about when we asked the question of, how you doing. That is the distraction version, right? That is the I'm not really connected and whatnot version, versus the, how are things going with specifically A, B, C that is meaningful. That's the intentional version. That's the decompression, right? Because we do need that. We need that intentional release of the stress of whatever it is that we're going through between our work life, our personal life, our spouse's life. And I think that that's something that you and I talked about a little bit ago this morning, was one of the things that everybody's focusing on right now is the business and the financial outcomes for individuals and companies. There's also going to be a mental health component to all of this coming out of this crisis. That even those in a stable home, after being trapped in that home to a certain degree and isolated to a certain degree, are going to have struggles coming out of this. And then on top of that, you look at some of those that are more vulnerable in our society, where we already felt like we had some mental health crises going on, and that there was this stigma of mental health, you know, we need to be ready that there's going to be a lot of people that need help. And
Yeah.
sometimes they just need to talk. Sometimes they're going to need something more professional. And we cannot carry that same stigma that we had about mental health coming out of this crisis as we had going into it. Because a lot of people are going to need that help right now.
That's a good point. And just to tag up on that, you won't necessarily know who those people are.
Correct.
So that might be the person on Facebook that just posted something that really like fires you up and you're like, why would they say this? And you don't know that that's not that person who's struggling, that's on the back end of this struggling. And that's just how they're releasing it. And I would encourage people to just have a tremendous amount of compassion and patience during this time, because Mark said a phrase the other day, Mark Keen, where I'm going to paraphrase it, but you don't know how much it costs to be that person right now. You don't know the costs that they're paying to be them. And we've got to really just come at people with so much compassion and patience, which really goes back to your earlier point, assuming positive intent, that would really serve us right now. But we just don't know what people are struggling with. We don't know what people, whether it's mental health issues, struggles in their marriage, struggle in their family dynamic.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I thought I just heard a struggle going on downstairs. So
I was
like, real time, something just happened in my house. I hope everyone's okay. I just have to share that Raylena Shirley is on, and she said, "You are a rock star, Armando." So we're just going to call that out, because he is Raylena. Now you actually get to see him live and actually talking real time. And Raylena just talked about being guilty of
social distraction.
Social media. Yeah.
Yep.
Here's the thing, guys. Don't hear that as judgment. My goodness, we're all just trying to make the right next step, the right next move, whether we quote Frozen or whether we quote, there was another book that talked about the same thing, whether it's Frozen or whether it's the books, we're doing our best. And we're going to keep changing what our best looks like, and our standards will keep adjusting on what that looks like. But just try to reach for something that decompresses you instead of distracts you. So Armando, we talked about some of the things that you're doing. Is there anything, I don't want to be cognizant of our time, because
you're fine.
Of course, we ran over. That's so weird of us. Armando,
yeah, we would never keep talking.
We'd never do that. It's tough because I was like, oh, that's a good point, Armando. I want to jump in. Anyways, this is what we do. But is there something you're staying away from? Is there a habit that you're not doing right now because it's not serving you in this period?
Ooh, that is a good one. I'd say one bad habit that I've picked back up, let's say, that I've not said no to, is I was on a bulletproof diet, and it served me very well for a while. It's been a little bit more difficult. I've definitely, with some of the stress, been caught stress eating. That's definitely one of my vices, for sure, from that standpoint. I have tried to be pretty good about saying no, for me personally, from saying no to binge watching a show. There's a couple that have been recommended to me, and I normally save those for when I'm traveling. So that's normally my binge watching. Like,
you're not watching Tiger King? What?
Well, it's funny. I judged my wife for watching Tiger King a little bit, and then I watched it, and I was like, it didn't serve me well, because it was a train wreck, and I got caught in it for a period of time as well. And then I'll have to share with you, one of our VP of sales decided to make light of this weekend, and so he spent the whole weekend posing in different Tiger King poses with stuffed tiger animals, his 9mm, and his wife's leopard print outfits and sparkly outfits, because why not? Because that's what it's just, we're trying, like, we get a little bit of a leash because we're a creative, fun company, but like, reality is, like, we all need some of those releases, right? And he was doing it for not only his own amusement, but also for that of others, just to give them something to look forward to. If you could share
those photos, we could also enjoy in that amusement. That would be great.
I will definitely make sure to do that. But like, normally that's for whatever reason, I get motion sick when I try and read while traveling. So that's normally my binge
Mm-hmm.
is when, I'm stuck in an airplane for 4 hours. That's when I'll watch 3 or 4 episodes of a show. And
Sure.
so I've not had that. And
Mm-hmm.
I've so far been able to say no to losing myself to 3, 4 hours of watching like the Ozarks,
Yeah.
or Lock and Key or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good to know. I love it. So, in that kind of same vein as what your VP of sales did, I saw a photo, floating around. I don't know if there's any Rocky Horror Picture Show fans listening. This might be dating me, but someone had dressed up like Frankenfurter, which, is essentially a man with a black wig that's wearing garters, the whole get up, and he is mowing the lawn in the backyard, but lots of people can see it. I don't know if lots of people can see it or as just people taking photos, but it was hilarious. And I just want to say, I would love if someone in Reno, Nevada would do that, because it adds some levity, right? Of
Correct.
course, for all the people that don't know that movie, they're like, why is Steve out in his is that a garter he's wearing? Yeah. Anyways. But just adding some levity like that, or even we talked about this, yesterday, we've been going around with the kids and using sidewalk chalk and writing on the sidewalks of all their friends in the neighborhood. And we did it with the grandparents too. And, writing inspirational messages and drawing flowers, things like that. It's good for the kids. It also gets them to be involved with it, but
Yeah.
also the people that get to come out of their house and see a garden drawn on their driveway.
On the driveway and their sidewalk. Yeah.
It matters to them. It really does. So sometimes it's just those little things that you can do that have really brightened someone's day, because again, to Mark's point, you just don't know what it costs to be that person today. And if you can show up and do something like that, it can make such a difference.
It really can. I think that's a great point. It's something that, we've been doing around our neighborhood, is just getting a chance to get out and walk and seeing the other kids, do their sidewalk chalk and leave messages out. There were happy Easter messages that were out today, and a couple of happy Passover messages that were out today as we walked through our neighborhood, right? And just realizing that, there's a lot of people that right now, with the holidays that are upon us, with a lot of spring birthdays that are upon us, that they're used to celebrating with their friends and family right now, and they're not able to. Right. And so just providing those moments of, like you said, levity. Or my wife's birthday was a week ago. And so she's in a mom's club. And the mom's club, I was setting up this, basically they all parked out in front and, put like, before they had me bring her outside, they put like different presents around the yard, which are bottles of wine, of course. And, they did this whole celebration for her because they couldn't go and celebrate. They couldn't be a part of that. They knew she was isolated. They were all still safe at a distance, but it was still trying to find those moments to connect. Right. And there's a lot of ways to still do that today, even with the distancing that we have. And I think that that levity and that connection is what is going to bring society and humanity out of this on the other side, for sure.
It really does. We had a game, it's called Table Topics. We ordered off of Amazon, and it's just a card game where it asks like a question, like, I'm oversimplifying it, but like, if you could be a superhero, who would you pick and why? It was just questions like that. So we've been doing that game on Zoom calls with adults, and it's fun. We all get together after dinner. It's like 6:30, 7 o'clock, and there's Zoom with 8-10 people on there, and we ask the question, and then everybody goes around and does their answer. And it's a simple game that you can play, but just having that connection, people need it right now. There's that meme that's going around, like, introverts check on your extroverted friends, and it has like the extrovert pulling on the door. And truth be told, I am said extrovert. Like, I'm incredibly extroverted, incredibly gregarious, also a big time traveler. So all of these things are a struggle with how I usually show up in the world. And so it's been fun for my introverted friends. They're like, I've just been having this great time, but I think about people like you, and you guys must be struggling. Again, just reaching out to people and showing up to people however's possible. is just so important in this time. Do you have, I would love for you to share, let me just say, Chris, thanks for joining us. And Ashley, thanks for joining us as well. And I love seeing Jenny's name pop up. Jenny, I need to see your name pop up way more because I miss your face. So thanks for hopping on, and Mark as well. What words of encouragement do you have, either for business owners or even for people in general? So words of advice, words of encouragement during this time.
I think that the biggest words of advice or encouragement that I can offer is just simply that realize that this too shall pass, so to speak. We will get through it. We don't know when, but it will happen, right? It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think the biggest thing that from a business owner standpoint is just be ready to pivot, right? Let's go ahead and throw the connection to your podcast out there, right?
It's trademarked. I'm just kidding.
Perfect. But you've got to be ready to pivot right now.
Yeah, this is the time.
Your product, your service, regardless of what it is going to have something different about it coming out of this crisis. There's very few products or services that will be exactly as they were on March 1st of 2020 as they will be May 1st of 2020.
Totally.
And so you need to find, where are those differences within your market? Where are those new opportunities, new verticals to go into? Where are those ways that you can provide a different level of value than the others around you that will set you apart? Right? You know, for us right now, one of the things that we've done is we realize that traditional sales and marketing right now will be completely tone deaf.
Sure.
So we're hosting a website specific to our industry with an assortment of resources that different entertainment operators can go to. It's at amusementrecovery.com, and they can get information on the different loans that are out there. They can get linked to articles that are industry specific of things that they can be doing to prepare for when they can open back up, different ways that they can, package things. We're hosting a weekly kind of mastermind call with our different manufacturer and vendor partners within our industry that supply complementary and cousin and sister products to what we do on a weekly basis, in finding groups like that where you can talk about the mutual struggles, the mutual wins, the mutual strategy, the information that you're all hearing from your different clients and shared clients, so that, again, find as many data points as you possibly can so that you can make those accurate decisions, and look to leverage that into better relationships with some of your partners and vendors and clients as well. Like, that's a big positive right now is make sure, and we always prided ourselves to not be transactional with our clients and to be much more of the partner and even almost the Sherpa, so to speak, taking them through the process to get them open, to get them to be successful.
Gandalf, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, or Gollum and Precious with Mark Keene from the other day, right?
It comes back again.
He will forever be my precious.
Sorry, Mark.
From that standpoint, right? Find a way to connect on a different level, to provide value on a different level, to make sure that you're not just another person calling them for their money, right? Find a way to help them and to support them and to be a real partner.
Yeah.
And that is going to set you up coming out of this to be much stronger than you were going into it.
I think that's such a good point, Armando, because it comes back to communication. And previously we were talking about communication with our staff, but communication with clients and partners. Because to one of our earlier interviews, Jackie Munoz, she owns an insurance company out of Calgary. She said, make sure you're talking because everybody's listening.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a good point, because not only is everybody listening, and you should be communicating with them people are listening, definitely communicate to them. But even communicating because I hear this from some business owners, they're like, we're not sure what to communicate. It can be just, hey, we're here, we're going to get through this together, we're all getting to the other side of it. It could be something like that. One of our earlier interviews, Bobby Jide, founder and CTO, excuse me, of Makers Valley, he had said, he's in Italy and they have manufacturing plants in Italy. They're all shut down. His entire business is based off of this, right? And so he said, we're constantly getting video messages from the staff of the factory saying, hey, we're still here. We're ready. Like, we're all ready and teed up. And the second we get the go ahead, we're jumping in. And this is amidst I don't want to say pandemonium, but some pretty intense situations that were happening in Italy. This was, I don't know, probably about 2.5 weeks ago now. I mean, they were in the thick of it. And yet people are thinking, I want to still communicate. We're still here. The factory will still open back up again. We're hands at the ready. We're ready to go as soon as that happens. So communicating now is really, really key. And also, people will remember who communicated with them. People will remember who they felt like they locked arms with during this time, and relationships will be forged. I mean, they will be set in stone in times like this. And the reverse can be true too. So that's why we really want to communicate proactively with clients and with partners. Hey, we're here. We're getting through this together, because that's what we all need to hear right now.
Yeah. And I think that, to your point, is making sure that that communication is clear, that you're doing so with a good message, and that you're doing so intentionally. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's so important, and that will solidify and make permanent many relationships for the years to come. Mm-hmm. But if you do communicate in a tone-deaf manner, and you do communicate out of touch with what's going on, you can also break those relationships. Sure. Because you don't know the price that individual or that business is paying. And so, like you mentioned earlier, so if you're communicating in a manner that is me first as a business owner, you've already lost. Yeah. And you're going to lose far more downstream. You need to communicate in a you first manner, you being your clients and your partners. How do I help you in this time? How do I be ready for you when you're ready to come out of this? How do you come out of this in ways that has nothing to do with us as a company? Yeah. Right. Like it's there, the website, for example, that we put up, there's nothing about sales on there. There's no branding on there. There's nothing that says come buy something from Creative Works or any of the other 30 companies that contributed with this from our partner group. It is all about, how do you help? Sure. Or how do you get help? How do you open back up? How do you get ready for the new normal once that new normal is ready? And how do you survive, until then? Some companies are going to be able to turtle up, so to speak, and just weather the storm, and others aren't. I think that's a new normal that society hasn't yet pondered. Is there is going to be a number of businesses that will not make it out of this, right? And you're not going to necessarily be able to just go to the same favorite restaurant you might have gone to as a family a month ago, right? Or the same entertainment venue or the same theater or whatnot, because some of those venues will not have been properly set up to survive something like this. And so I think that just society and our norm is going to be different, in making sure that you're doing everything you can as a business to bring some of that normalcy, as well as to be prepared for the new normal, I think is important as a business, regardless of whatever industry you're in right now.
And to still stay relevant with these times. So whether that's adjusting your marketing message so you're not tone deaf, whether that's providing resources, communicating judiciously, but communicating, letting people know what they need to hear right now. It's huge. So stay relevant, continue to pivot your business, and don't look longingly at the door that closed, because we can't. Door closed for many, and not all, because we've had people on here that we had an aviation manufacturer out of Canada, a client of mine, great guy, Peter Breer, and his business is incredibly busy because the Canadian government has asked him to manufacture sneeze guards. So he is just rocking and rolling. Well, his wife is I believe it's an optometrist, completely shut down.
Yep.
one business is now at, completely shut down, and then the other one is booming. So everybody's in a little bit of a different situation. But if a door has shut, whether that's revenue, whether that's clients, whether that's a strain, that there's some compression in your industry, quickly look for a window that can be open. And it may not be obvious, but don't spend a lot of time looking at that door that's shut. If you can't change the outcome, don't keep focusing on that. Don't spend time thinking, oh man, the good old days were 30 days ago. We got to quickly look for the windows.
How crazy is that to say
Yeah.
that? But you're true. Like the good old days, the glory days, literally, like normally things like this take months to years to have a shift that we've literally had in the manner of weeks.
It's true. Remember when we were all living high on the hog in March? Yeah.
Right.
Back in February, that was the sweet days.
I mean, that's exactly, my wife and I, we were fortunate enough back at the beginning of February, we went to Disney with our young kids.
Yeah.
Right. Couldn't fathom that right now.
It would be irresponsible.
Right. Between the travel and the time being there. And it's not to say that we weren't still the normal parents that like, hey, we're at Disney. There's thousands of people here. Let's still clean our hands. Logan, don't lick that hand railing again.
Yeah.
All the stuff that typically happens.
You can always do it once, not twice. That's
right.
When we cut you off.
But it's one of those things where it's like, that seems so long ago.
Right.
And it hasn't even been 2 months.
And it floors you. I'm having a conversation with my 6-year-old yesterday, and it was around two things at bedtime. One was, which actually makes me kind of sad to think about. She's like, Mom, when can we go to Disneyland? And again, she's 6, so she doesn't get everything, and she shouldn't get everything that's going on.
Right.
She, has definitely heard the conversations. We've had plenty of conversations around it, but she doesn't get the severity of it. And so one was, hey Mom, when can we go to Disneyland? I really, really want to go because, her friend at school, Kinley, or, someone else in the first grade also has gone to Disneyland and she wants to go too. So there's that. And then the second one was, will the Easter Bunny still come even with Corona? And it was kind of, that cut a little deep. And I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't transmit to rabbits. You're good. No, it's, and I assured her that yes, Easter bunnies still come even with the coronavirus, or COVID-19 as it's now called. So yeah, it's
surreal when you get that kind of a question, right? From the mouth of babes.
I know.
Right. It's just like, is the Easter bunny going to still come? Right. Or, my kid was just, he's already asking about Christmas. Right. And one of them's got a birthday in June. He's like, oh, I can't wait. I want to do this for my birthday. And we're like, I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm not going to crush your world right now, but we're already trying
but I am going to crush it at some point.
Yeah. I'm going to have to set the expectation that all your friends are not going to be able to come over. Right. And he's 5 and he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Like they understand the idea of it because they even talked about it a little bit in school. We sent home for e-learning, but they don't understand the full gravity of what it means yet.
They don't.
And that's the part that is going to be the unknown.
I know our 6-year-old, she's turning 7 in May, and she wants to have it at a trampoline park. I'm like, oh God, that's not going to happen. And same thing. We're not going to cry. We're like, well, we're going to have to wait and see what's happening. But it's coming up in about a month's time. And
yeah, like that's our industry, right? And that reaction is the same thing. Like we know that there is going to have to be this movement where, like I said, like for something like that, the cleanliness is going to have to become part of the show.
Sure.
Right? Because you, as the mom, are making 80% of the purchasing and event decisions for a family. And so you are the target of who needs to be talked to about, are you going to now feel comfortable having your child's birthday party out in a venue like that again? And when are you going to be comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Right? A month from now is probably going to be a little bit too early for you. It sounds like, right?
Sure.
What if it was in September?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to know, right?
Again,
and that's the part that we just don't know in our industry.
We don't know if it's a cat or a house still. Again, there'll be more data points at that point. And I think it's a really, really good point. So as we navigate our kid's birthday, it's going to be interesting. Armando, you have added so much value to us and so much insight. How do we, and I thank you for that. I had so many notes that I wrote down, some really fantastic points. How do we support you during this time? How do we give back to you right now?
For us individually, I mean, because we are a B2B business, there's not a large, way that an individual will contribute to us directly. I think
Sure.
the biggest thing that I would ask for anybody out there is, be safe right now while we need to be safe. Once we understand what the new normal is, don't be afraid to return to your new normal, right? Don't be afraid to eventually have that birthday party back out at at an entertainment venue, to travel again, to go to a Disney or wherever you might have wanted to go beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
We'll eventually get back there,
Yeah.
and know that we will get through this. And I think that that's just the biggest thing from that standpoint that I can ask for anybody right now is, because we all need the escape. We all need the place to celebrate, right? My wife, for example, she's got literally a hash mark on my whiteboard in my office. We talked about this the other day, and I'm staring at 22 days now where she's hash marking like she's in a, isolated solitary confinement prison.
She's not scraping in the wall yet, so you're
Not
doing good
yet.
still.
Once the whiteboard gets full, we might get there. It might just start continuing down the wall. But
do you guys have like a soccer ball that she could name Wilson?
We probably could. I've got a couple kids that might decorate it for her as well. But once we get out of that isolation, which we eventually will, is just again seeking out those opportunities to escape, to celebrate. Where you were before, because we'll eventually be safe to do it again.
That's a good point. It's a good reminder. Yeah, we get past this. This isn't the whole book. It's just a chapter. We get past this. And at some point, our kids are having birthdays at the trampoline park again, and everybody's able to connect in the way that they used to. And it'll be a new normal, but this season does come to an end. It doesn't last forever. Yeah.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Armando. This has been fantastic.
Well, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you for, just hosting a platform like this for others to kind of talk and learn from.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. It's the least we can do to show up and kind of, if a resource is shared or some insight is provided and it makes someone else's path a little bit easier, or an idea that they hadn't considered, it's all worth it.
No, very much so. Very much so.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.